Jen Mall, and welcome to Nurse Connect. I am an RN and a board-certified nurse coach. I believe that connecting with others is essential to living a happy and fulfilled life, and that sharing our stories not only helps us to heal ourselves, but also helps others by inspiring hope and optimism. I am so grateful to share stories of these incredible nurses on their journey, and I encourage you to find a way to share yours too. Thanks for listening in.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Nurse Connect podcast. Welcome, Allie, to the show. Happy to have you on today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Oh, I love to let you tell your story because you can certainly tell it better than I can. So why don't you take us back? How did you become a nurse? What has been your journey and kind of where are you at now?
Sure. I'm going to try to make this not like 8 hours long because my nursing journey could be that long. So I actually grew up in Southern California. I was a swimmer for almost 18-ish years. I got a scholarship to swim in college, so I ended up going to San Diego State, and I was getting my bachelor's in exercise science because I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist or go to PA school. And I grew up in a single parent home. My mom was a nurse, and I just saw her struggle and just how hard it was to raise 3 kids on her own, and then how hard she worked as a nurse. And I was like, I could never do that. Like, she worked in ER for most of the time. And I'm just like, I don't really want to do that. I didn't like blood. I was like kind of the kid who was like, ew, that's gross. But as a kid, I was always like, oh, I want to be a doctor. Like I remember my pediatrician being like, oh, are you going to be a nurse like your mom? And I was like, no, I'm going to be a doctor. And so I don't know where that came from because I was not interested in medical at all. But just something I said. And then growing up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved sports, and I taught swimming lessons, and I loved doing that. And I loved being around kids, and, I liked babysitting. And then I also coached swimming for a while when I was in nursing school. And I really love doing that. It just doesn't pay well. And it's not super, you can't get a lot of hours doing it because usually they practice for an hour a day. And so it's just not a lucrative career. And so as much as I loved that, I swam in college. I got my bachelor's degree, and my last semester of school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Southern California, the PA and the PT schools run about $50,000 a year. And I was like, for the amount of money that I'm going to make, this is surprising coming from how financially illiterate I was in school. I actually made that decision, and I was like, I really don't want to spend all this money and not get the return on investment of, what PTs and PAs made at the time. And so I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. And I was like, well, maybe I want to go to nursing school. I had some friends who were doing it, and I was like, well, they seem more not sissies, but more girly than I am. And they're like, if they can do it, then I can do it. And my mom was one of those, she's not like this anymore, but was one of those old school nurses who's like, you have to go to CNA school. If you like being a CNA, then you can apply to nursing school. So I went through a 12-week program while I was still finishing my undergrad for CNA school. And it actually ended up in clinical in a long-term care facility for kids. And I loved it.
Oh,
I remember one patient that will stick to me to this day. And I just loved taking care of their family, and, I really just connected with them, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So from that time, I knew I wanted to do something in NICU, PICU, or peds. So I go through nursing school, and I decided to pick up all these other hobbies while I'm in nursing school, which why would I ever do that? I don't know. But I'm the queen of overextending myself. So that's really, whatever. So I am in a relationship in nursing school. I, get to the end, and I'm like, okay, I want to work at these 3 children's hospitals in, Southern California. And that was my dream. And so I had missed the application for one of them. And then the other 2, they were the new grad programs in Southern California were only certain time periods. So I graduated in January, and I would have had to work as a CNA from January to July. So July would have been when I started.
wow.
And I was like, I just graduated. I have all this debt. I just want to start working.
Yeah.
So I applied to places all over the country, and I eventually heard back from a a hospital system in North Carolina, and it was a very prestigious one. And I got the job, and I was like, wow, I've never been to North Carolina. I didn't even like go there like to see if I'd like it. And I was like, well, I guess I'm moving there. And moved here on a whim, and my mom like packed my car up with me, and we drove across the country. And that was in January of 2015. And then I won't touch on this a lot, but I worked in a step down unit, and then kind of like finagled my way into the ICU because we would float down there, and it's really where I wanted to be. And I met my ex-husband in May of that year, and he was living by the beach during this time. And so, I, as many of us women do, invested a lot into that relationship and didn't really do much in the Triangle area, which I wish I would have at the time. And I kind of gave up that dream of like working, in a pediatric setting. And a year and a half later, moved towards the beach and got a job in CCU, which is the coronary care unit there, and worked there for a year. But they were doing renovations, and this will kind of be the theme throughout my whole nursing career, is just I was always like at the right place at the right time, and really networked really well, and then floated to a unit, and then they'd be like, oh my gosh, you should work here. And then I would like convince myself that I should work there. I don't really know why I did that, but it's fine. It gave me really great opportunities. Yes. And so at the time we were renovating all of the ICUs, so they were shutting them down like one at a time. And so I was floating to the CVICU. I really enjoyed the CVICU. I thought that's where I would be long-term. I never wanted to go to CRNA school. I just like loved taking care of post-operative patients. I loved cardiac patients. I thought it was so interesting. I thought the devices were really cool. I like loved being educated on everything. I, got to do ECMO. I got to do CRRT. Wow. I got to do all of that kind of stuff. But I just didn't really jive with some of the day shift people. And so I begged to go to nights, and I'm not a night shift person at all. Wow. So I started on nights, and I had a much better time. I got along with that crew a little bit better, but it ended up being super unsafe, and there were just some things that happened. And then I just got really torn down from just taking care of machines instead of people. And I was like, this is not why I went into nursing. And I almost quit nursing at that point. Wow. And I met Kat from Nurses Inspire Nurses at that point. It was like, I think the end of 2018. And so I also applied to NP school at this time too. So a lot of changes, kind of like what I'm going through right now in my season of life. I like to do it all at the same time. But I applied to NP school, got in, and then a PICU job opened at the same hospital. And I'm like, I've always wanted to do PICU. So I went to that manager because I knew somebody that was working there, or like connected me with the manager. And I was like, I really want to work here. I said, if I don't transfer units to something that I've always wanted to do, like I'm going to quit nursing. Yeah. And so I was there, and I probably would have stayed there while I was in NP school and, stayed there long-term. But I was there for almost 3 years, and I ended up getting divorced. And so I could not stay there anymore. It's just a very small town. And my ex still lives there. And I was like, I just can't continue to stay here. I was working PRN for a while, driving the 2 hours, would go work my 2 shifts and then come back. And it was just too hard. I have 2 dogs, and it was really hard for me to say goodbye to that job. I left on really good terms, and I just really loved that unit. I loved the physicians. Every day I'm kind of bummed still that all happened. And it was probably the best place I've worked, in my whole career. And so I was there for a while. And then when I got separated in January of 2021, I started at a different hospital in another PICU. I had like the best schedule ever. I was working every other weekend, but I was getting part-time benefits, which was really cool. Wow. So that's something also that we can talk about later, is like, I was really good at my first 2 years of my career, was working a lot of overtime. So I fell into that trap, trying to pay off debt. And then after that, I realized like, that's not the way to go. And so what I did was I would find certain ways to work less, but get paid more. So when I was in the CVICU, I worked every weekend, which was an extra $10 an hour. It's called weekend option. And then I would pick up one shift during the week. And then I also did respite care. So I always found really creative ways to make more money without having to work harder. And so this job was really great, coming from, just getting separated, still in NP school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I would pick up for their like super, super high bonuses. And I was making way more than I would have made anywhere else. And I was only really working maybe 2 shifts a week. It just depended on like what I was doing. And then I was like full time in my business other than that. And I was doing really well with that. And we can talk about that too, because that happened earlier, but I'll go back. So I'll stick to the nursing part right now.
We'll get there.
After that, so I did that. I got really drawn into the lure of travel nursing in February of 2022. 2022. Yes. And so I took a local travel assignment. I loved the unit. I was PICU at the beginning, and then they called me the day before my contract started, and they're like, would you mind just being on the peds floor? And I'm like, well, I've never done floor nursing ever. The floor ended up being amazing. The people were amazing. It made me realize how burnt out I was, and how much I just loved like talking to patients and, playing with kids and all that kind of stuff. And so it really brought me back to like why I liked nursing, but I worked almost every weekend. I had barely any time off. I worked night shift, and I'm just not a night shift person. I'm a miserable human being when I'm on nights. So that lasted 6 months. And then a girl that I know from Instagram was like, oh my gosh, you should come to my unit. We're hiring, it's a super great work-life balance. It's procedural nursing. It's super different. And, it was a pediatric cath lab, and I loved it. Like there's some things that like are difficult. Some weeks you don't get your hours, because it's procedural. Yeah. And then some weeks, you have to stay late, there's calls. So like all those kind of things like are kind of annoyances sometimes, but for the most part, I loved the physicians. I loved the patients. I loved what we were doing. I would do PACU some days, which was really nice. And then I started that last August, and I thought I was going to be there for a really long time. And I had surgery this June, and just some stuff happened, and it just made me realize that I want to go somewhere where I'm valued and where I am treated kindly. And without going into tons of detail, I just felt like it was time for me to leave. Yeah. So I applied to one job that I actually didn't get. And then we were talking about this earlier. I actually start a remote triage, pediatric triage job next week. And then I also had orientation today for clinical instructor. Oh, so cool. In my short 9 years, almost 9 years of nursing, actually this month is 9 years. I've done a lot. I've seen a lot. I don't regret ever transferring, because they've always been moves that have been because I went somewhere and that unit manager really just said you would thrive here. And I've tried to follow my gut and my instincts when it comes to like leaving. And if there was some place that like I felt really valued and felt like was where I wanted to be for a really long time, then I hope that's what this is. And I hope that's what being a clinical instructor will be, or being an educator. And I just have had not the greatest experience in the field. And that's one of the reasons why I've wanted to be a clinical instructor. And so I'm hoping that kind of pans out. And I'm hoping the fit right now where I'm at will be good. So that's kind of my nursing journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the beauty of nursing, is that there are so many options, and how important it really is to trust your gut. Because there's no need to stay miserable in a job. There are plenty of options out there.
And I think I tried to convince myself with this job that I have now that like, it's really good money, I can't take the pay cut. But I have felt the most stressed, the most out of my element, the most like uncomfortable all the time. And that's even like out of work, that I just don't want that. Like work should be work, and it shouldn't stress you out, and you shouldn't worry about it when you're gone. And I've always said that, and I just was like, it's time to go.
Yeah.
That's how I'm feeling.
Yeah. Oh man. And it is any job worth your mental health? No. But sometimes it takes us a while to figure that out, especially when we're doing work on ourselves, and we do sometimes kind of have to go through that. And then you're like, okay, nope, there's somebody else. There's somewhere else that's better for me.
Definitely. And I think sometimes we look at something, because I mean, I have thought like back and forth too, whether or not this is the right decision for me. And I went down a rabbit hole of like people saying, you know, remote triage is horrible and like it's the worst job ever. And like, you know, they quit after 6 months. And I'm like, well, I'm like, I'm gonna like it or I'm gonna hate it.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see. And you know, the hours of my current job are great. Like the work-life balance is really good. The pay is great, but I just, sometimes things can look really, really good on paper and it just doesn't feel right. And you just gotta, I'm learning, you have to listen to your gut when it comes to that too. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you've, it seems like this is going to be a good option for you for the triage. And like you said, I mean, you really don't know if you'll like it until you try it. And then if you don't like it, you know that there's options out there.
It's very true. And I think I shadowed, and I do think it's somewhere where I will get really good experience, and I think I can help people. And I just think, I think it will be really good for me for this time. So
yeah, very cool. Okay, so we were going to round back to a few things. One of them was around, I think we were talking about the financial literacy piece. Do you want to start there?
Sure. Okay. So if we remember so I became a nurse in 2015. I moved to North Carolina, and I grossly underestimated how much the cost of living was going to be. I started at $21 an hour out here, which I was making more as a CNA in California, which is hilarious. And I just think I didn't really think about what I was going to have to pay for. So like I had my student loans, I had $46,000 of student loan debt. I moved with $15,000 of credit card debt, and I just didn't know how I was going to do everything. I also moved with a car that was on its last leg. So I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do if I have to get a new car, because I can't afford any of this. And so I didn't buy any furniture in my apartment. I think I had a bed set, and that was pretty much it. I was working basically a shift extra a week, so 4 shifts a week as a new grad, and was severely burnt out by like the first year and a half. And that's when, even working, you know, the extra shift a week, I still wasn't making ends meet. And I vividly remember sitting at a gas station one day before payday, and I had to like, you know, the button that you click, like whether it's credit or debit. And I knew I didn't have any money in my account. So I clicked credit on my debit card, because I knew if I could make it to the next day, I'd be okay. And I was like, I'm a nurse. I should not be living like this. And I was like selling clothes back and like and I still could not like afford anything. And so I read, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by, I always butcher his name. His name is like, it's Ramit. And the book, after I read the book, I opened a high interest savings account, and this was in 2016, which high interest savings accounts were not big until 2020. Like people were starting to talk about it. So I opened a high interest savings account. I started to save money. I went through everything that I was spending, and I really just got focused. I kind of went down the Dave Ramsey hole and cut everything out. And, you know, I really feel like that was the wrong way to do it, but that's how I got rid of my $15,000 of credit card debt, was really just, I never went the beans and rice route. I always like, I shopped at the farmer's market. I would buy like the same food every week. I cut everything but like my gym membership, because that was really important to me, because I was Olympic weightlifting at the time. And I was still paying for like my nutrition coach. And so like, those were the 3 things that I knew I couldn't cut back on, but like I negotiated my cell phone bill. I cut the cable. I, you know, got a cheaper internet. What else? I like got cheaper car insurance. So like I went through everything and audited all the things that I could cut back, and really just focused on working extra. And that extra shift was what I threw to my debt every every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And once I paid the $15,000 of credit card debt, I ended up buying a new car because I needed it. And I was able, I don't think I put any money down. It was probably, I think I went like the longest term lease that you could, or the longest term, whatever that you could, to buy a car. And I just was like, wow, I'm an idiot, but I needed the car at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't make the best financial decisions. And, a little bit after that, so like I want to say 28. No, it was like mid 2017 because it took me 18. So a year and a half it took me to pay my student loans off, and they were paid off at the end of 2019. And I also got engaged during that time too.
Yeah.
So this was when I was working the weekends only. And so I was working weekends only, picked up an extra shift in the middle of the week to like get bonus money. And I also was doing respite care, which is basically like babysitting kind of, but it was for a military family, and I would get paid cash from them. And so that would go towards my student loans. And so I was just paying as many payments as I could during the month over my, whatever extras that I had.
Yeah.
And I really focused on paying that down, but I also wasn't super aggressive with it. And so I shared my journey on Instagram. I started posting about it, and I was like, okay, I'm making this payment this day and this payment this day. And I would screenshot my payments, would like put little gifts on there. And this was on my personal account at the time. And circling back to meeting Kat from Nurses Inspire Nurses in 2019. I get the dates wrong all the time. I think it was 2018 because it was around the time that I was like it was 2018 because that's when I started in the PICU. So in 2018, no, it was 2019 because I had paid my debt off for a year and I had like 8 more months to go. Okay. It was 2019. So I'm getting my dates right.
Awesome.
So in 2019, in January was when I started NP school. Kat had a mentorship, and it was called the Leap, Land, Live method. And I really tried to figure out like what I wanted out of life. And she had been following me for a while and was watching me pay all this debt down. And she was like, I've never seen anyone share like what you're sharing and like do what you're doing. And I think I'd just gotten engaged too. And so like I knew I had a wedding that I was going to have to save for. And she was like, I think you have something here. So I wanted a way to earn extra money, and I wanted to work less at the bedside. And so I was like, well, I'll just start by taking like, clients and doing like really quick, like 1 hour budget and debt payoff calls, because I'm like, I know how to write a budget. I know how to create a debt payoff plan. And I also was taking the approach that was very different from the very aggressive. I was, you should be able to afford the things that you like to afford. And then you can also pay off debt, and you can save at the same time, and you can invest. You just have to allocate certain things to each thing and tell your money where to go, instead of just being like, I'm going to pay off all my debt and then I'm not going to do anything else. Because it's not sustainable. And if you're in a debt payoff journey, or if you are trying to save for a house, it's not going to be sustainable for you to save all your money or pay off all your debt all at once. It's easier, and you're going to stay and stick with it just like a diet plan if you do it in increments at a time. Okay. So like you aren't going to cut everything out of your diet and like slash to 1,000 calories, because it's not sustainable. Right. You're going to cut back a little bit and then still enjoy those treats and still enjoy those things that you really value. And that's why I talk about values-based spending, is because if you are spending on things that you value instead of like what everybody else is telling you to spend money on, then you're going to be more adherent to your budget and to your plan, your financial plan. So I started taking clients, and then I did another mentorship to like learn how to write a course. And so I created a course, and it's called 3 Phases to Financial Freedom. And I did a group program, and I had tons of people in the group program, which was really cool. And at that point, I probably could have quit nursing, but I still really enjoyed it. And so I was working part-time as a nurse. And then my business was doing really well until I got separated. And then I think I was in the middle of a group program, and I had some one-on-ones, and I had to be like, I'm going through this thing and I'm going to have to just take a break. And so I ended up like probably a couple of weeks after that, like finishing that group program, finishing those 101s. And I think I launched one more group program in 2021. And that's when I started to go back to the mindset of, I just need to have a baseline of like bills paid with my nursing. That is that, so I think having the divorce and everything really put me back into the scarcity mindset of like, I can't make money from lots of different places. And so that's why this is going to tie this all back. Why I think it's so cool that I'm taking this job now that is less pay, because before I would have just looked for the highest paying job and been like, I have to earn all my money from nursing, when that's not really the case. Last year, I really didn't earn much from my business, but I'm starting a podcast and people are interested in a one-on-one again. And I think that getting away from that mindset and getting away from me feeling so bad all the time in my job and being in a better place mentally, I'm able to serve the people that I want to serve and still talk about the things that I want to talk about. And, my creativity has even come back in the last couple of weeks, which has been really cool. And, I was really focused last year on creating content and just bringing like free resources to people, because I think a lot of people online, they need to charge what they're worth, but I think there's a lot of people who are charging way over what they should be charging. And it's not accessible to people. And I think financial literacy should be accessible, especially to nurses. And while we do make very good money, school is expensive. I know people that I've worked with that have spent that $100,000 on school. And it's like, when you have that much debt, it's very overwhelming. It's very shameful. And I think the one thing, if people can take away anything from this piece of it, is your debt allowed you to do something, and you have to take away that shame and that negative mindset around the debt, that it's not good or bad. It just allowed you to do what it allowed you to do, and just move on from it, and you will eventually pay it off. And I think this hyperfixation on like glamorizing, as much and as cool as it is that I paid off a certain amount of debt in a certain amount of time, it's no better than anyone else's journey who is maybe on a slower journey, as long as it's sustainable. And so that's kind of where my journey of like being a coach and, my own financial literacy. I actually bought a house this last year. And so that was really cool, being a single woman buying a house. And I was a part of an article of people from the Washington Post actually found one of my TikToks about buying a house as a single woman. And
oh my gosh,
it was like me and 3 other women. And there was a photo shoot that they did at my house. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. It was so cool. And I think sometimes we as entrepreneurs or people don't focus on those things, and we focus more on like, how much money did I make? How many clients did I, and last year you would look at me and say like, you were a really unsuccessful entrepreneur. But actually looking back, I was very successful in like what I wanted to do. I wanted to buy a house. That was my goal after I got separated. I had this really cool newspaper article written about me that I would have had no idea that that would have ever happened. I worked with a lot of really cool brands. I served a lot of clients. I came out with a lot of like free and accessible resources for people. And I think that matters more than how much money you make as an entrepreneur. So
oh, I love it. You've done such a great job of sharing both the pros and cons of both entrepreneurship and bedside nursing, and how beautiful it is that you've married those together, and that you've found a way to balance. And like right now, the financial piece from nursing isn't necessarily your priority. It's the mental health and well-being, like being in a job that you feel valued in and are comfortable in and has better hours and work-life balance. And then maybe shifting your focus back into your entrepreneurship role and seeing where you can beef that up now and continue to grow in both areas. I just love that.
And I think what we miss too is that when we make more money, that we're going to be able to pay off all this debt, or we'll be happier, whatever idea that we have at the end of that are like when we make, like, I love pay transparency. I think it's great that we're talking about pay as nurses. I think it's great that nurses are making tons of money, but I know a lot of travel nurses that are making boatloads of money and have nothing to show for it. So I think that piece of being happy is very important, especially now when things are shoved down our throats to like buy more, to make yourself look better, feel better. You know, there's so many ads, so many influencers that we, you know, look up to or, you know, compare ourselves to. And I just think that it's really hard to just kind of like be okay with, you know, just having what we have and just wanting to be, maybe not have the most successful job or the most, you know, the highest pay, but being happy. And I think my finances are always the best when I'm happy and not when I'm making the most amount of money.
Oh, so true. So true. I appreciate the openness about talking about finances and the debt. And I really appreciated the taking the shame away from the debt. Because I think that's something I've always struggled with, is like, I had such an amazing trip. And yeah, I put probably too much on credit cards, but all of the memories we made and the time spent together and all those things, I don't regret that. And so just like acknowledging that, like, that I spent that money in a different way and it was worth it. And now I have the responsibility to pay that off, but not to attach shame to that piece of it. So I appreciate that.
And I think just letting that go and then saying, like, now that I know better too, I'll allocate more money later on because I want to make those memories and I want to make that a priority in my life to like create those memories with my family. And it's okay. It's not, I mean, not every trip you're going to be able to pay cash for, and that's okay. It's not always the case. So
yeah. And values-based spending, that was another term that I haven't really heard. And I want to learn more about, because I appreciated the way you kind of phrase that, of like, what is most important to you? And then how can you kind of allocate your money in that way?
So I can give you like a short version of how I do it. So basically you write your values out. So I'll give an example. So mine are freedom and flexibility. They're not always going to tie to money, but you can always tie them to like some aspect of your life and make them, you know, kind of overarching with monetary. So with freedom, it's definitely like jobs. So like, what jobs and opportunities are going to give me freedom? Which things am I doing with my money that are also going to bring me freedom? So investing, saving for the future, you know, having a big emergency fund so that if I want to, she's smashing a trash bag. Sorry.
Oh, I couldn't hear it at all. You're good.
So investing, saving, having a hefty emergency fund, which I like to call an FU fund, so that you can just walk away from experiences and things that don't align with you. Those are all freedom. And so freedom and flexibility kind of go together. And then, so that's job specific. And then also like what things you do with your money. And then for me is my health and wellness. That's another really big category. So kind of like what I talked about, my debt-free journey, I was still paying for a nutrition coach. I was still buying food from the farmer's market because I knew it was cheaper, but also I knew that I was going to get the best food. I, you know, will pay for, what else? Like I paid for surgery last year because I knew I had to have it. So I know I set aside money for those kind of things. And then also my gym membership, those are things that that I don't want to give up, no matter how much I want to save or invest. Those are things that are priorities to me. And in that book that I referenced earlier, it's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. He talks about how you can afford anything, but you can't afford everything. And I think where we get into this trap is where when we make everything a priority. So the most high tech things, you know, the newest clothes, you know, the newest car, you know, getting a bigger house, like those all can't be your priorities. So really honing in on 2 or 3 values that you really align with, that make you feel good, and spending in those areas, and then letting the rest kind of just be what it is okay. And I think that's really a good place to start. And you can branch that out as you make more money and as you have more like accessible, freed up income. Yeah. It's also easier to do that and add more things. But if you're starting from not very much and you don't have a lot of extra, just starting with those 1 or 2 values will really help you stick to whatever budget or financial plan that you have, and will really help you achieve your goals. Because if you don't have financial goals, or you don't, have certain things that you're going to stick to, then it makes it really difficult.
Totally. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So, as we're kind of wrapping up, I want to see if there anything on your heart, another last message that you'd like to share with our group of nurses today. Can be anything, career, personal, financial, whatever's coming to you.
So this was a topic today, and it's actually been a topic recently in the last couple of weeks. I've had my social media since I started paying my debt off. I most recently have grown a lot more. And the one thing that I've always done is I will never share where I work, and I will never share like anything at work. I will not post anything at work. I won't post anything on company time. And I think it's really saved me because I had the video go viral recently of me leaving my current job, and people were still saying things about it. And I knew in my heart that what I said was how I felt, and I didn't regret anything I said, and it wasn't anything I could get in trouble for. And even coming up today, the person who hired me to be a clinical instructor, we talked about the social media policy, and she's like, well, you have a big Instagram, right? A big following. And I'm like, yeah, I have a big Instagram and a pretty big TikTok. And she's like, we've had this really good conversation about social media and like, how to like present it to students. And I think that there's a way to go about social media, and there's a way not to. And it's not that you can't share your story, and it's not that you can't find humor in our profession. There's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And your job is never worth, like, your career is never worth risking that for social media. And I know some people will say, well, my job sucked anyways, or, like, I'm glad I told the truth, and, they're doing full-time social media now, but I just never wanted a reason why I left a job, or I, got like I just never wanted it to be because of something I shared. Right. But I've always wanted to be transparent. And so I think trying to find the line between sharing your story and being open and honest, but then also just protecting yourself and your career is pretty huge. So it's kind of something that's been weighing on me recently. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that is really important. And it is not talked about very much, especially in the world of online entrepreneurship, because that's kind of like what we're doing, right? As we're putting ourselves out there, but there really is a risk if you're working for somebody else. You do kind of have to walk that line. So
definitely.
Awesome. Well, Allie, where can people find you?
So I'm at _debt-free nurse on Instagram and TikTok. And my mom and I are starting a podcast. It's called Nice Girls Wear Scrubs. Fun. So that I think we're recording our first couple episodes next week. We were supposed to do it this weekend, but my mom was babysitting her grandkids. So I was like, let's not do that while they're there. So those are kind of the places. I've had some issues with people taking my profile. So just make sure just everything is _debt-free nurse. So
yeah. The bigger you get, the more haters you get, right?
Well, it's people trying to scam other people. And I found out because they messaged my cousin, and I was like, oh, this is not me.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice. Well, Allie, thanks again for coming on today. It was great to chat with you. I love all the tips and tricks you shared with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.